Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back to some more bite-sized business advice, and we have an episode that's a little bit outside of business today, but it's also important. That's one of the things I love about this show. I sound so arrogant already because it's my own show, but we don't just talk about business here. We talk about business, mindset, body, health, spirit, all of it. You can't be a successful business owner if you don't have the rest of your life intact. So we're going to dive in today. We're going to talk about self-love, self-care, all of these things, debunk some myths. And I have a guest here to do it all with me, Sam Morrison-Wilson. Sam, before we go any further, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation because it's one of those hot topics. It's a buzzword, right? Self-care, self-love. And I don't think it gets enough coverage. And I think people have a lot of made-up stories in their head about it. So let's define it first. What do you say self-love is?
I say that self-love takes 6 different types of self to tie together. So a lot of times people will say self-love and self-care and use them interchangeably.
Look at me. I'm already making mistakes here.
Right? It happens all the time. And so I believe that self-care is part of self-love. That if all you do is self-care, you're not going to have a life of self-love. There's also self-growth, self-respect, self-esteem, self-worth, and self-awareness. And so there's 6 of them that all come together. I have what I call my love wheel. And whenever you can do a little bit in all those areas, you'll create a life of self-love. The biggest myth that I think that I'm working on kind of countering in the world is that so many women think that self-love is selfish. And so that's why I title most of my talks, Self-Love is Not Selfish. And I'm on a mission to work with women to help them learn how to love themselves more fully, to be able to give in some really pretty cool ways that they want to do, but it doesn't deplete from them at all, to where they still get to take care of themselves. And so self-love is not selfish.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I've also noticed, whether it's leadership in business or as a parent with your family, you can't give fully if you're not whole and full yourself too. So you need to fill that bucket. And I definitely don't believe that it's selfish. There can be selfish ways of going about it. Yes. So I want to kind of pick this apart a little bit because we don't want to be a narcissist, right? But we want to have self-love and take care of ourselves. Yeah. So can we start to unpack these 6 pillars, if you will? Where do you want to start?
Well, I have a good example of what it means. So I had 2 church services. One a friend of mine went to, and one my mom's pastor was talking about self-love the same weekend. And I was able to experience both services, listen to one online. I went in person. And I'm like, after listening to those 2 sermons, no wonder the world's confused, because nobody says the same thing, right? And whether you're a Christian or not, and I am, but even if you're not a Christian, you understand that self-love can be toxic, right? It can. And people say, oh, self-love means you're a narcissist, or you just put yourself above everybody else, or that you're more important than anybody else. But that's called love of self. Love of self. But when you have love for self, that's when you can actually put yourself in a place of priority, so that you take care of yourself, so that when you do give, it doesn't take away from you, like I said earlier. And so the idea of, if you're doing it properly, love for self is the goal. Love of self is not the goal. And it definitely, you said that, this isn't really tied to business, but this is tied to everything. Mm-hmm. If you don't love yourself properly, you show up in wildly different ways. Before I started my self-love journey 9 years ago, if I actually went through a training and they asked me to use one word to describe myself in that moment. And the word I used is still hard to say, but it was true. I said I was worthless.
Hmm.
How do you think you show up in the world? How am I going to give and to contribute to my family or to a company if you feel like you're worthless? And so it's tied to everything. So if you can do one thing different to build on creating this life of self love, it'll impact everything and have a ripple effect, not just for you, but everybody in the world.
Yeah, the language you use for yourself is incredibly powerful. And to say you're worthless, or really any negative word, I
Yeah.
mean, interchange it for however you feel at any particular moment. That's how you're going to show up. And that's
Yeah.
how other people will perceive you, whether they can relate to
100%.
it or not. They're going to say, oh, that person is a worthless,
Yeah.
useless individual. So yeah, that's a good message. So I'm curious, when you're working through this process with, you work predominantly with women, but this applies men too. We got a lot of our
100% it applies.
where do you tend to start? I mean, if I were to take a stab at it, I would say we would probably want to start with awareness. Am I right?
You have to start with awareness. Yes. Well, yes, awareness is important, but believing you have the worth, self worth is usually where I start, because unless you believe you're worth it, you're not going to do anything. You may know it, but you're not going to do anything with it. And one step further back from that, whenever I actually encourage somebody, if I meet somebody and I'm just talking to them and they're like, where do I even begin? I have one thing that I suggest. Just, and it's so easy, it's free, anybody can do it. Start a gratitude list. I believe that gratitude is the powerhouse of creating a life of self-love, because when you focus on the good and the things you have to be grateful for, you're naturally going to see more of that, and then you're going to be able to start. It just is a magical thing. I don't know how it happens or why it happens, but if you start with gratitude and you build from that, then you can actually start to create the life of self-love.
Yeah, I mean, it's the oldest cheat code in the book, and it's not magic. It's not a cheat code. It's in the good book multiple times. It says prayer and thanksgiving. Give
I know.
thanks in everything you do, all over that book.
I know.
All the Bible is obviously what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's people, the gurus on the internet want to say, oh, gratitude, gratitude. Where'd you get that from?
Yeah, I
Give me
know.
give me your
Give me the
original
original
source, please.
source. The original
Yeah,
source, please.
source. Give credit to the original source. But yeah, it's because it's, I mean, psychologically, from a science perspective, it is impossible to feel any negative emotion and gratitude at the same
At the
time.
same
So
time.
if you are in gratitude, truly, you can't feel worthless. You can't
Yeah.
feel
And
like,
it's the easiest thing to do. So just start writing them down. Keep a well, I personally am a big believer in writing. There's something tactical that happens in your and it just solidifies it. My mom has told me for years, write it down, make it real, right? And so writing is the first choice. But if you don't have the ability or you think I'm gonna forget, then use your phone or on your computer, but keep that gratitude list, because when you're having a bad day, because we'll have bad days, then what do you go back to? You go back to that list and you read it. um, I have just last week, I've been doing this for 9 years, and last week I had a situation come up where I've been dealing with some dental issues and I wasn't feeling well, and I went to order groceries online, which is what I usually do. And in an effort to save some money, instead of having them delivered, I was going to go pick them up. And so I told my husband, this is the time that we're going to go pick them up. And he's like, cool, we'll go. And then I go check on the order and I forgot to hit submit.
hmm,
And in that moment, the negative self talk started. And I had to say, "Nope, that's not true. Nope." And then we get there to pick it up, and there was a storm, and their systems were down. So we didn't get the groceries and all this stuff, right? And so even though I'm aware of it, it's something you have to do continually. Um, but being able to catch those negative thoughts to where you say, "Oh, that's not true." The truth is, it was an accident. It's not a big deal. We're not going to starve, right? And so being able to grab those thoughts and replace them with the truth, that would be the second step I would do. Gratitude, and then being able to recognize your thoughts, which is the self-aware part.
yeah. And the tough thing too is, obviously, you said you've practiced the negative words with yourself for a long time. So that will come up, and it's about practicing now the new positive beliefs and the new positive self-love. So I'm curious if we take a step back, because those are two fantastic places to start. But these two sermons that you heard, can you give me the summary of each of them and kind of what they said about self-love? And we can,
Yeah. So my
we don't have to name the
mom,
church though. Let's not throw anybody
I
under the
won't. I
bus.
won't. My mom just started going to this little church. We live in Texas, and she's in a small town, well, middle-sized town. I won't even say where. And she just started going to this church, and it's a small church. There's probably only 40 or 50 people there. And she wanted me to go. I was visiting her, so I went. And he was talking about love of self. So he was definitely talking about it from the negative point of view. He never mentioned that it could be positive. He talked about how it can cause narcissism and being egocentric, and how you're putting yourself even before God. And he was focused on all the negative, which is true. It can happen. And at the very end, he was praying, and he actually out loud said, you need to stop loving yourself. And it took everything I had to not say no. But like, I was sitting behind his wife and their kids and my mom, who she would have been mortified. But no wonder the world is confused. And so, because what do you believe? And when you have to have the basis of understanding of what it is to begin, which is why when somebody joins my community, I want them to go through that self-love mini series, because it gives the base. And if you go through it and you don't agree with my base of understanding, that's okay. It's okay. But you probably won't be a good fit in the community, because everything we do ties to that. The second sermon, though, which I listened to on the way home while I was driving home from my mom's, he was talking about the good kind of love, love for self, and how taking care of yourself was really important to be able to give. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to give to anybody else. He's the one that used the words love of self and love for self, and put that in my brain to help me understand the way to make that make sense. And so it actually gave me wording around being able to communicate the difference.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, the first guy's right. Let's not discount that. Like the word pride is love of self, and it's idolatry. So it is completely anti-biblical in the whole sense. But what you're talking about here is the love for self and taking care of yourself so that you can give to others, which I think is a very noble thing to do.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people too. I think women are more guilty of it, and you can speak to that as well. But it's almost like this, like a martyr syndrome. It's to say, like, I give so much to other people and I take nothing in return.
Yeah.
It's like, cool. Then you're exhausted in like 3 weeks. Yeah. Where does that get you and other people?
Yeah, 100%. And it comes like Jesus, like he is our example, right? I get it. So I see why it happens. And I know that we're not Jesus, right? And we can't do those things. And so what I like to teach, the way I teach the women in my community is, and I don't have one here with me, but I use the symbol of a cup. Everybody knows the phrase, you can't pour from an empty cup. But what I do is I imagine that cup on a saucer. It's sitting on a saucer, and you keep your cup full by doing all the things, love for self, not love of self, and then all the excess flows to the saucer. And you pour out of the saucer to give in very generous, kind, loving ways without depleting yourself. And when you do that, you've created a life of self-love, and everybody wins.
I love that analogy. That's so beautiful. So we don't have enough time to dive into and unpack everything. I did put your website. You have a community. I put that on the screen. It'll be in the show notes down below, whether you're watching or listening to. It's school.com/safeheartconnections. If you haven't heard of School, go check it out. School is cool. Yeah, it's so cool that you have a community over there. And you have your mini series that you mentioned.
Yes.
You'll get free access to that as well, right?
100%. Yep. They just log in. They'll get a message from me saying, here's where you start. And there's a few videos just to get them, show them around the community, how to maximize it, learn a little bit more about me and what we're trying to do. Then they go through the self-love mini series, and we just have a great time. The connections that are being made in the community and the dialogues back and forth with the women have just been magical. Just brings tears to my eyes. One woman, there was a devotion, not a devotion, an affirmation thing that we had. She read it, and part of it was to say out loud to yourself that you love yourself. And she typed her name, comma, I love you in the chat. And I just was like, I mean, the fact that I get to be part of this is really pretty amazing.
That's so cool. Actually, let me run this by you because I think it might apply. Maybe someone in your community has done this. Have you heard of the exercise with the First Corinthians verse, "Love is patient, love is kind," where you switch your name for love?
Oh, yes, I have. Yes.
Oh man,
Yes.
such a cool exercise, and then it really makes you think about yourself too. It's like, oh, I don't know that I am patient or kind.
Am I though? Is that before or after coffee?
Yeah, let's wait till after.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me today. This has been wonderful, and I appreciate you helping me kind of get the word out. And just remember, self-love is not selfish.
I love it. I absolutely love the topic and really what you're going after here, because it's so important. Like I said, we need to nourish ourselves in order to give back to others. You can't just deplete your own and empty your own cup, the analogy that Sam used before. So Sam, I have one last question before I let you go. It's the most important question. It's a question for a question. You see the question mark behind me? I love questions. I'm a big fan. We believe powerful questions get powerful answers. So around the topic of self-love, what do you want someone, the listener, to walk away from this episode with? Give them the question that they're going to ponder over for the next day, week, month, whatever it is, that's going to impact them and get them on this journey for love for self.
What would your life look like if you loved yourself?
Oh, that's a doozy of a question. I love that one. That was awesome. Very, very cool. Well, wherever you're watching or listening, think about that for a few minutes before you go on and do whatever you're going to do, whether it's working out, driving to work, wherever you are. Think about that question and see what the answer that comes up is. And then if you need a little help, school.com/safeheartconnections. Sam will walk you through how to love yourself the right way in order to give back to others. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe. We want to see you on Harmonious at Lunch tomorrow. We'll see you on the next episode.